My mother-in-law gifted brand new iPhones to every grandchild in front of a full house, except my daughter, because she's not blood. What followed shattered my marriage, exposed betrayal, and saved my child. Imagine a family gathering, filled with the usual chatter and warmth. Then, the atmosphere shifted, thick with tension. My mother-in-law, with deliberate precision, began handing out brand new iPhones, the latest Pro Max, no less, to every grandchild present. Every single one, that is, except my daughter. She's not blood, my mother-in-law declared, her words slicing through the air like broken glass. My 8-year-old, her eyes wide with innocent confusion, stared at the phones in the hands of the other children. 20 people were crammed into my living room, the home I owned, witnessing this calculated exclusion of my little girl from what was undoubtedly the year's most expensive family gift. The silence that followed was deafening. "Grandmother, why isn't there one for me?" my child inquired, her voice a heart-wrenching whisper of innocence. "Because you are not truly a family treasure," she retorted. "These are exclusively for my blood grandchildren." The sound of my daughter's heartbroken sobs echoing from upstairs, mingled with the awkward, uneasy chuckles from our guests. When I confronted my mother-in-law, she simply shrugged. "It's my money," she stated, unconcerned. "I'll give it to whoever I choose." My wife returned from her trip the very next day. Her reaction truly froze my blood. "Mom's just old," she rationalized. "I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. You're overreacting as usual." That night, everything irrevocably changed. I informed my wife she had a stark choice. Her mother would leave my house within 24 hours, or she would accompany her. The first clash erupted at dawn. My wife found me in the kitchen, calmly pouring coffee. The picture of someone who had reached a final, unwavering decision. "You can't just throw her onto the street," she shrieked, her voice reaching that high pitch indicating a loss of control. "She's my mother. She's old. This is my home," I responded, my voice level. "The deadline is not negotiable." "So, what's she supposed to do?" she countered. "Live on the streets?" "She should have considered that before humiliating my daughter," I replied. "The slight was aimed directly at the little girl you've raised since she was 2. The small girl who calls you mom." I watched her face crumple as the weight of my words sank in. Yet, that flicker of vulnerability lasted mere moments before familial loyalty swiftly barricaded her. My mother-in-law, emboldened by my wife's quiet support, retreated to the guest suite. When I later went to remind her she had only 18 hours left, she offered a smile that sent shivers down my spine. "I am not going anywhere," she declared. "I have tenancy rights. And if you try anything, I will call the police for domestic violence." Her voice dripped with a misplaced confidence that only legal ignorance can bestow. My wife transformed into her personal shield, delivering meals and intercepting me whenever I neared that part of the house. "Leave her alone," she'd insist. "She's stressed enough as it is." That afternoon, I made the pivotal call. My lawyer confirmed my suspicions. A formal eviction could drag on for months. He advised me, as a professional whose time was billed by the minute, to document every single action the woman took in my home. Every insult, every veiled threat, every instance of spitting. In hostile eviction proceedings, the party with the most thorough documentation prevails. That night, I initiated a password-protected digital file. I christened it the War Diary and began logging everything: the precise date and time, a comprehensive description. Each jarring slam of the guest room door. Every mumbled, thinly veiled insult as I walked past the kitchen. Each time my daughter descended the stairs, tearful, because her grandmother refused to acknowledge her. The first undeniable revelation came when I reviewed the bank statements. My wife had provided her with the debit card. The expenditures were frankly outrageous. A $340 charge for a premium coffee maker shipped directly to an apartment address. $180 for Korean skincare products. $95 for high-end vitamin supplements. Seriously? I demanded of my wife, showing her the statement. "You're funding her after what she did to our daughter?" She replied, avoiding my gaze, "About medical expenses." "She's old," she muttered. "She needs things." I meticulously recorded each transaction. Every lavish purchase added another entry to my file, proving there was no hint of humility or remorse. The situation escalated to a nuclear level a week later. A social worker from Child Protective Services appeared at my door, following an anonymous complaint. It alleged that serious home tensions created an unstable and potentially dangerous setting for a child. As I calmly explained the situation, providing copies from my initial diary as proof of a pattern of antagonism and emotional abuse directed at my daughter, her demeanor noticeably shifted. Before leaving, she stated that the individual who filed the report possessed very particular information about your residence. Details only someone who lives here would know. When I showed the report to my wife, she vehemently rejected it. "It must have been someone else," she insisted. You're fabricating stories to turn me against my mother. Her eyes burned with that searing fury that erupts when reality clashes with deep denial. That night, acting on the social worker's advice, I installed security cameras throughout the common areas. I announced it during supper, explaining it was for transparency in the household. My wife found no ground to object. My mother-in-law, however, visibly paled. The following day, I served the formal eviction notice. 30 days. The official clock had begun its relentless tick. Our home transformed into a frigid war zone. My wife retreated to the living room sofa, refusing to share a bed with me. Our daughter was enveloped in a profound silence. But amidst this disarray, I did something that brought me an odd sense of peace. I discreetly obtained the new iPhone 16 Pro Max for my daughter. I presented it to her in her room, the box simply wrapped in plain gift paper. "This is from Dad," I told her, holding her close as her eyes brimmed with joyful tears. "But let's keep it our little secret for now, okay? Just so we don't stir up more trouble." It was my quiet gesture, safeguarding her amidst the turmoil, a reminder that no matter what transpired, she remained my utmost priority. As I reviewed the camera footage each night, a new clarity emerged. This was no longer just about removing my mother-in-law. My objective had broadened. I aimed to liberate my wife from her profound denial before it was too late for all three of us. The official eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, handed over by a sheriff who seemed more uncomfortable than any of us. 30 days. The conflict was now undeniably formal. My mother-in-law accepted the document with that chilling smile, waving the paper like confetti. "He's given me 30 days to find an excellent lawyer," she smirked, "one who will teach him who truly holds the power here." The cameras I had installed quickly proved to be my salvation. The first capture occurred that very afternoon. I was reviewing the recordings when I overheard my mother-in-law conversing with my wife in the kitchen. "When this idiot runs out of money for lawyers, he will give up," she declared. "Besides, this house should be yours by right. You are my daughter, not him." My wife whispered something indistinct, but offered no contradiction. I immediately secured the file. The second capture happened 2 days later. I caught her deliberately scoring the hardwood floor in the living room with one of her large suitcases, which she dragged with purposeful force, staring directly into the camera. When I feigned not to notice, she smiled and continued her destructive act. "What happened here?" I asked my wife that night, gesturing to the marks. "It must have been an accident," she offered. "Mom has arthritis. She's not very good at carrying things." But I possessed the video. Every intentional movement, every malevolent smile. The third capture was the game changer. The hallway camera recorded her entering my office when she presumed no one was present. I observed her rummaging through my desk, unlocking drawers, and ultimately pocketing a pair of silver cufflinks that had belonged to my father. When I later informed my wife that items were missing, her response laid bare the depth of her lost state. "I'm sure she merely stashed them somewhere safe," she argued, "so they don't get lost among all the attorneys and papers." My wife had crossed a line. It was no longer simply denial. There was active complicity. The breaking point arrived a week later. I was working from home when cries erupted from the garden. I rushed out to find my daughter screaming beside the water, her clothing completely soaked. "What happened?" I yelled at my mother-in-law, who stood at the edge, arms crossed. She slipped, she drawled, with a nasty smile I recognized all too well. She was running where she shouldn't have been. My daughter trembled in my arms. "Daddy, I didn't slip. Grandma pushed me because I told her I didn't love her anymore." "Children lie all the time," my mother-in-law countered, "especially those who haven't learned to respect their elders." That night, as I gently dried my daughter's hair, I made a life-altering decision. It was time to end this charade. My mother-in-law had gone for a walk, most likely to slander me to a neighbor. I waited for the opportune moment to approach my wife, suggesting a truce night to talk and resolve things like adults. I ordered her favorite dishes from the Thai restaurant she adored, arranged candles on the dining room table, cultivating an atmosphere of false hope. We had the house entirely to ourselves. My wife sat at the table with a hesitant expression, as if anticipating an apology or a surrender. Her hands were clenched, a mix of fear and tentative hope. I said nothing at first, simply turning on the dining room television and connecting my laptop. "What is this?" she inquired. "I want to show you something," I stated, with the calm born of holding all the undeniable cards. The first video began to play, her mother asserting that the house should be hers by right, and that I was an idiot who would give up. I watched my wife's face tighten. "This must be out of context," she murmured, but her voice now lacked conviction. "Wait, there's more." The second video displayed the deliberate sabotage of the floor, every calculated movement, every defiant look at the camera. My wife began shaking her head, but her eyes remained transfixed on the screen. The third video was the decisive blow, the theft of my father's cufflinks, starkly clear, sharp, and undeniable. I watched her open my desk, specifically seek out those items, and conceal them in her purse. My wife fell silent, her mouth agape. And this, I said, playing the audio my lawyer had legally obtained, is the call to Child Protective Services. My mother-in-law's voice was unmistakable. Yes, I want to report a dangerous situation for a minor. The stepfather is creating a hostile and violent environment, and the child is at risk. My wife's house of cards, built so carefully on denial, crumbled in an instant. I watched her face cycle through all the stages: shock, comprehension, raw pain, then incandescent anger. She burst into tears, but these were different. She wasn't weeping for her mother or the impossible situation. She was crying for her own profound blindness, for the suffering she had allowed to be inflicted upon the child she had raised as her own, for the betrayal she had unwittingly enabled. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could I have been so blind? How could I allow her to do this to our daughter?" At that precise moment, we heard the front door close. My mother-in-law had returned from her walk, likely satisfied with having poisoned another neighbor against me. My wife wiped away her tears and rose from the table with a fierce resolve I hadn't witnessed in years. She strode toward the guest suite with steps that resonated like hammer blows. I followed her discreetly, remaining in the hallway. This was her battle, and she had to emerge victorious alone. She opened the door without knocking. My mother-in-law was busily organizing her day's purchases, more of my wife's money spent on frivolous items she didn't need. My wife spoke in a hard, steely tone I had never heard her employ before. "Pack your belongings. You are leaving now." My mother-in-law turned, offering that condescending smile she had perfected over decades. "Excuse me. I am not going anywhere. This is just as much my home as yours." "I watched the videos, Mom. I witnessed everything." My mother-in-law's smile vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. "I saw you stealing. I watched you intentionally harm the house. I heard you contacting social services to harm an innocent child." My wife's voice quivered, not with fear, but with tightly controlled rage. "And I saw you shove my daughter into the water." "You have no proof of any of that," my mother-in-law protested, but her arrogance had completely evaporated. My wife pulled out her phone and showed her one of the videos. "Isn't this proof?" For the first time in my memory, my mother-in-law's eyes filled with fear. The fear of someone who had finally grasped that her actions carried consequences. "You have 2 hours," my wife stated. "Contact whoever you need to contact. Find a place to stay. But after 9 o'clock tonight, I do not want to see you in this house. You can't do this to me. I'm your mother." "And a mother doesn't abuse her daughter's children, steal, or lie," my wife responded, taking another step closer. "You haven't been my mother for a very long time. You've been a parasite." My mother-in-law attempted one last desperate attack. "He's brainwashing you. He recorded those videos to manipulate you." "No," my wife replied with terrifying calm. "He installed those cameras to protect our family. From you." I stood in the hallway, observing the dramatic power shift, and I did not intervene. There was no need. My wife had finally found her voice, her backbone, her absolute limit. And for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope for our marriage. The war was nearing its end, but the most crucial victory had already been secured. My wife had opened her eyes. The next day, I witnessed something I never expected. My wife, with a glacial calm I didn't know she possessed, was helping her mother pack. There were no screams or pleas, just a heavy silence that seemed to weigh down the air in the room. My mother-in-law made one last desperate attempt at manipulation, collapsing onto the guest suite floor and sobbing with a dramatic performance she had honed over decades. "He's turned you against me," she wailed, clutching the hem of my wife's jeans like a toddler. "I'm your mother. You cannot do this to me." My wife paused and looked down at her. The coldness in her words sent shivers down my spine. "No, you did it. You harmed my daughter. You shoved a youngster into the pool and stole from my own home." She knelt to her mother's level. "It is over." For the first time in my life, I noticed genuine terror in my mother-in-law's eyes. The woman who had ruled my wife for decades realized she had lost all control in an instant. "You have no right," she cried, standing up with a sudden urgency she had never displayed. "This house should be mine. I am blood family." "Family?" My wife stood up, and for the first time, I truly saw the powerful woman who had been hiding for years behind the guise of the obedient daughter. A family does not pressure its children. A family does not steal. A family does not contact social services to harm innocent people. My mother-in-law played one final card. "You're going to regret this. You are nothing without me. I raised you. I gave you everything. You conditioned me. You manipulated me. You taught me to prioritize your comfort over the well-being of my own child." My wife's voice broke, not from weakness, but from an overwhelming sense of liberation. "Not anymore." 2 hours later, her sister arrived to pick her up. The anxiety in the air was palpable as my sister-in-law entered and immediately noticed the packed luggage. "What really happened?" she inquired directly. I didn't have to utter a word. My wife handed her phone, which was playing one of the videos. I watched my sister-in-law's face transform from shock to sheer loathing as she witnessed her mother taking items from my desk. "Oh my God, Mom. What else have you done?" My mother-in-law attempted her final maneuver. "They're fake videos. He manipulated them, but my sister-in-law had already seen enough. Get your things. Let's go." My mother-in-law turned to me, a look of pure hatred blazing in her eyes. "This isn't over. I'm going to destroy you." I approached her and, in the calmest voice I could summon, stated, "You already tried and you lost. Now leave." I had presumed that was the conclusion. I was mistaken. The conflict had merely shifted battlefields. The next morning, my wife's phone vibrated incessantly. Text messages and Facebook notifications poured in from friends, neighbors, and distant cousins. "How could you abandon your own mother? Your mother is heartbroken. She says her son-in-law manipulated you into hating her. I saw your mother's post, how awful. I'm praying for her." My mother-in-law had launched her ultimate weapon. She had crafted a lengthy, sorrowful narrative on her Facebook profile, a masterpiece of fabrication. She depicted herself as a frail, elderly woman, unjustly ejected by a domineering son-in-law and an indoctrinated daughter. She spun a tale of simply wanting to reunite the family, her heart torn asunder. There was no mention of the theft, the call to social services, or the pool incident. She was the quintessential victim. I watched my wife read the post, her face a mask of fury and profound pain. For a fleeting moment, I feared the old doubt might resurface. But then she looked up, meeting my gaze with steely determination. "The time for being quiet is over," she declared. She did not respond to the post directly. She did not initiate a comment war. She did something far more astute. She created a WhatsApp group for essential family members and sent a single message. "I know many of you have seen my mother's post. Before anything else, I ask you to watch this." The facts speak for themselves. She attached the videos of the theft and sabotage, as well as the audio of the call to social services. Then, with an unnerving calm, she left a solitary public comment beneath her mother's post. "Mom, it breaks my heart that you've chosen to make this public with a version so far from reality. The decision we made was the hardest of my life, and it was to protect my daughter. I'm not going to engage in a war here. Our close family already knows the whole truth." It was checkmate. The mother-in-law's post was exposed for what it truly was, a fabrication. Within hours, the tenor of the communications shifted dramatically. The friends who had initially attacked her began writing to apologize. The family, now armed with indisputable proof, unequivocally sided with us. Shortly thereafter, we noticed my mother-in-law had deleted her post, unable to withstand the overwhelming embarrassment. Her last weapon had detonated in her own face. She was now utterly isolated. That night, my wife performed an act that clearly signaled the healing process had truly commenced. She retrieved an old velvet box from the closet. Inside lay a collection of jewels, rings, bracelets, a pearl necklace. "What's this?" I inquired. "It's the jewelry my mother gave me," she explained, her voice resolute. "Every piece came with a condition, with a favor, with a string attached. They aren't gifts, they're shackles." The following day, we visited a pawn shop together. We sold every single item. We wanted nothing remaining that reminded us of that dangerous, manipulative presence. With the money, we began planning our next family holiday. That afternoon, we sat down with our daughter. "Remember how you've always wanted to go to the amusement park in Orlando?" my wife asked her. "And remember how Grandma always said it was a waste of time and money?" My daughter nodded, a faint hint of melancholy in her eyes. "Well," my wife continued, taking her hands, "Grandma was wrong. Your dreams are not a waste of time. They are the most important thing, and we're going on our next vacation. How does that sound?" My daughter's eyes widened like saucers, brimming with tears of surprise and joy. The mother-in-law's specific brand of malice, which had not only ostracized but also belittled her wishes, was now being dismantled and repurposed as fuel to realize those very aspirations. That night, as my daughter slept peacefully, my wife looked at me and said, "My mother was slowly stealing our happiness. Now, it's time to reclaim it." And for the first time in years, my house felt like the home it was always meant to be. A few months later, the echoes of the conflict began to fade. We transformed her old guest suite, her previous Viper's Nest, into a family movie theater. Nights previously filled with screaming and tension were replaced by popcorn-filled movie marathons. Our daughter's joyful laughter was the only sound now reverberating through the corridor. A phone call revealed the final, somber conclusion. It was my sister-in-law. My wife moved away to Converse, and when she returned, Her expression was a complex blend of sadness and relief. She sat beside me in silence for a long time. What happened? I gently inquired. She took a deep breath. It was my sister. She couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the manipulation, trying to turn her against her own husband. It was the same old pattern. She paused, glancing at me for a moment. They had her committed. Mom is in a nursing home. The news settled in the room like a heavy stone. There was no sense of celebration, no trace of joy, only the quiet weight of an unavoidable conclusion. My sister and I will pay half and half, my wife continued, her voice quivering slightly. It's the best place they could find. But that's her life now. I held her tightly. You didn't put her there, I whispered. She built that road herself, brick by brick. As a final act of closure, my wife tore up the 3 unopened letters her mother had sent her a few days prior. Our daughter, now entirely free of the shadow of condemnation, has blossomed into a more confident, more vocal, and significantly happier young girl. One night, my wife took my hands and whispered something that simultaneously broke and healed me. My family is just you and her, she said. No one else. Forgive me for taking so long to see it. Now, I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Was I overly severe, or should I have acted sooner? Edit. We upheld our promise. We traveled to Orlando last month. When I witnessed my daughter meeting her favorite characters and screaming with unadulterated joy on every single ride, I knew, unequivocally, that we had truly won.